Hello, hello, Amplify You family. Michelle Abraham, your host here today. And I've got an amazing podcaster with me today. I've got Linda Hunt from Accessibility Solutions Podcast. She is the host going into season 2. We had the pleasure of helping Linda get her podcast up and running last year. And we're so excited to see how far it's come. And so Linda is coming to us all the way from Ontario, Canada today. And I'm excited to dive in a little bit more about your podcast journey in this behind the mic interview. So welcome, Linda. How are you doing?
I'm great, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome.
Yes.
So I wanted to talk today a little bit about your podcast idea. So your podcast has been really a tool to help grow your business and just help spread some awareness around things that you're passionate about and also things that your business is involved in. So I would love for you to just take us back to what was the reason and the why behind starting your podcast?
Yeah. So when I started thinking about my podcast, which was probably maybe almost 2 years ago now, it was a way to kind of build credibility and authority around the subject matter, which is accessibility. And most of the work I do is with businesses in terms of accessibility. So when we launched the podcast, it was with a target audience of businesses. But as the podcast went through season 1, we realized that we had guests on that either had stories to tell around perhaps their own disability or challenges that they had, or we had people with innovative solutions to accessibility issues. And so when we wrapped up season 1, we really took a look at our audience and the messaging that we were getting out there, and kind of revamped our audience and the format for season 2. So our motto is making the world accessible. And so it opened up our audience to anybody that's interested in making the world accessible or more accessible.
I love that. And it's neat because you've had a wide variety of different guests on your show over the course of the year, which I think is still really valuable. Although they may not have been targeted directly at business owners, I think their stories and inspiration has been really valuable for business owners to listen in and hear their stories from the podcast guests that you've had on this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's probably one of the reasons that we took a step back and re-envisioned the podcast for season 2, was that quite a few of the guests that we had really powerful stories of their lived experience with having a disability, and those lived experience stories really added to the messaging that we were delivering. So I have a disability and I can give a lived experience story, which I did in season 1. But hearing the stories of other people with lived experience around their disability and challenges that they've had as a result of their disability just made us realize that there was a broader audience to share those messages with. And that's why we kind of re-envisioned season 2 into really focusing on making the world accessible and what that means from a whole number of different, whether it be guests or information that we're going to be having on season 2 of the podcast. So so it was a good experience to run season 1, thinking of what we wanted to really get the message out that the business case for accessibility and that accessibility is good for business, but season 2 is still delivering that same message in different ways.
Mm-hmm. I remember you sharing with me that I remember looking at your statistics where the episode that you share, your personal story, and is one of the most like highest performing episodes that you have, which is great. And I remember you sharing like how you were elected a city councilor this year, and how sharing some of those personal stories really helped you get some more votes when you were out canvassing for votes. So what is it you think that so any thoughts on, just sharing your personal stories and how it relates to like helping people like really have a better understanding of accessibility solutions?
Well, and it's funny because I've done some masterminding, brainstorming around my business and the work that Accessibility Solutions does. We don't put that out there that Linda is a person with a disability. But some of the brainstorming, masterminding that I've done with various people around the topic is either I didn't know you had a disability, or the fact that I have a disability somehow ups my credibility in terms of working with us from an accessibility perspective. So, and that personal story, whether it be mine or anyone else's if it's a guest on our podcast, is I think it's bringing the personal message to why accessibility is so important. Because when you listen to someone's lived experience, whether they're facing barriers to employment or they're facing barriers to travel or whatever it is, it's almost like the aha moment at that point. Then you realize how important accessibility really is in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I know just being in your world this year has made me realize a lot of different things that, we could be doing differently in business, or like, for example, the conversation we were having the other day about choosing a retreat center that wasn't accessible for an event. So just so many things that, I've learned just being a part of your world this year has been really helpful to me. And I know like just from a podcast, speaking to other podcasters that might be listening to this today, knowing that your personal story, I think a lot of us come on as the host and we put on this like face of the host of the, we want to have the credibility and the authority, in which podcasting does give us all those things. The more we can share our personal stories, I think it opens up a whole other world of loyal listeners, and helps us with moving the needle from listener to like maybe even working with us a little bit and a little bit deeper. They can get an understanding of our experiences too.
Yeah, so that's one thing that season 1 did really open up for us, was not just persons with disabilities sharing their lived experience, but companies or businesses that have maybe innovative solutions to accessibility, and how that's opened up our business to then being able to work with them, perhaps on whatever it is that they've got that's their product or service that is innovative to making the world accessible, and being able to work with them with our clients, or whether it's referring our clients to them or incorporating their products into some of the services that we provide.
So one of the challenges I think podcasters have is finding guests for their show. I think you've had a no problem finding guests for your show, have you?
No, I haven't, and I think that was part of the reason when I started out. I envisioned more of a solo episode and Linda talking about all of the different concepts of accessibility, and then being involved, whether it be with Potapalooza or just in some of the groups that I belong to on social media. Yeah, certainly no shortage of people that realize accessibility is an important topic, and are willing to come on the show and be a guest and share whatever story they've got or takeaway they've got from our goal of making the world accessible.
I love that tagline, and you really make an effort of putting that out there in your episodes and in your intros and outros, and like making that known that that's your guys' goal with this podcast, and what you do is making the world an accessible accessible for everyone. And I think that's something that's a really great lesson for podcasters too. Like if you have like a podcast that's mission based, like make that mission a really big part of everything and what you're saying on the show, and it'll revolve around the show. And that's, you're creating a movement of people that are on board with that same mission that you are. So I think that's a really good, important lesson for podcasters that are, I believe, heavily in something, and that their podcast is kind of around that mission. The more you use it and you can say it and you can get your listeners saying it, it'll get your listeners hashtagging it. That's really great. It's really helpful.
Yeah. And for me, it brings together the more people talking about accessibility and how important it is. And so I'm pleased to have a podcast that does have that mission and that message, because it allows other people that are working in that space a voice to share their story or their experience around how important accessibility is.
Have you had a chance to get on many other podcasts as a guest?
Yes, I have, and I've been. It's primarily around. I as a speaker, have kind of two main topics that I speak on. One is the business case for accessibility and how accessibility is good for business, and the other one is more around my lived experience, and we call it adapt, adapt, adapt. So I used to, be able to jog in high heels, and how over the course of 25 years of living with a chronic disease, how important the power of a positive attitude is. So it's that's, we've got the business side of things, and then what I like to call the inspirational side of things for persons with disabilities that find that story inspirational, and that's important to get that message out as well.
I think that adapt episode is one of the top rated episodes on your show too. So make sure you guys go have a listen to it. You get to hear Linda's story in that episode. It's great. So Linda, now take us back to now you're season in and you're about to start season 2. For all those podcasters that are listening today that are maybe still on the fence, thinking about doing a podcast, should I do it? Should I not do it? Is it worth it? It's a lot of work. What would you say to them?
I think my biggest obstacle was, will I have enough to talk about, and the technology. So I'll give a big shout out to Amplify You, because you and your team really made getting the show launched easy. It was just a matter of, and I can't remember if it was you or Braden, but anyway, somebody said basically turn on the mic and start talking is the way to get started. And so, yeah, I got the mic from Amazon and I set it up on my desk and I just started talking, and I can talk about accessibility and disability topics, all day. So I think the biggest message for somebody that's thinking about a podcast, depending on what you're planning to use it for, it's really just getting over that fear and just getting started is probably the biggest message. So yeah, buy the mic and turn on Zoom and just start talking.
Going. And it's funny, I also thought that, oh gosh, I'm going to run out of content. I'm not going to have anything to say, or I'm not going to, know what to say. And that's a fear I hear a lot of our podcasters say too. But I think once you start the practice of opening up and expressing yourself and sharing your message, it gets more clear and you get more confident with it, and more messages just start coming through. You don't actually ever run out of things to say. And I think the reason that you've also been able to do this in a great way is you're taking people on a journey with you of discovery, and you're not here saying do this, don't do this, don't do this as an expert kind of demanding people to follow things and do things this way. You're taking people on a journey, and I think that's the real big difference between a successful show in a show that's, not doing well, or that they've totally run out of things to say, is because that you only got a few things that you can share as that expertise before you run out. But bringing people on that journey with you as you're exploring and learning, and also meeting new people along the way, I think it's really fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And as I said, when I started out, I thought it was going to be me talking about accessibility topics on every episode. And, then connecting with other people that were interested in the podcast and having them as guests on the show. As I said, and we ended up changing for season 2 a little bit of direction, because we realized that it wasn't just what I had to say about accessibility. It was all of the other stories and guests and their messaging around accessibility that was making it important as well. So,
Will you be doing more of your own solo shows in season 2?
I will be. So we just launched season 2. Actually, it just launched yesterday, which is an interview style with me around reimagining season 2. And then we've got guest episodes that are lined up, but also sharing the message around accessibility is good for business, and those types of things would be solo episodes that we would do. So I didn't have any concern about having enough content to talk about myself. So I think this season we're going to be mixing it up with basically what we ended up doing last year, was having guest episodes interspersed with solo episodes, and just around, messaging and, depending on kind of what's going on in the world, and addressing, some of those current events that are happening as well. So
that's great. I love your your season 2, just getting a little bit more narrow focus on what you're talking about. And then also, and one of the things I thought when I first started podcasting is that I couldn't change anything. It had to stay the same. Once you launch a show, that's it. You can't change anything. But there's a few things that you changed for season 2. So I know you changed your intro, your outro. Was there anything else that you changed?
Yeah, we changed. So we changed the intro, outro. We changed to a bi-weekly instead of a weekly. And the reason that we did that is because personally, I have a goal to be a guest on more podcasts. And so what we've actually got a number of shows that I've been a guest on, so that every other week we're going to be able to, so it'll be the Accessibility Solutions podcast, and then every other week we'll be promoting a guest appearance on another show, which it is also kind of from a podcasting perspective. It's not just our show and getting guests on our show, but it's also getting booked on other shows so that we can share the message. So that was the other thing that we changed up, was just in terms of the format was that. And yeah, I think just opening up. So the new intro and outro really opened up the broader audience, instead of, I think, season 1 that said, if you're a business looking to improve your bottom line, it was all around who that audience was. Whereas our intro and outro are a lot more broader in terms of the audience that we're serving with the podcast in season 2.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. One thing I wanted to ask you was, what was the one thing that's been surprisingly pleasant about podcasting that maybe you were fearful of before, or not sure about before, but turned out to be something good?
Well, I think my fear of the technology really ended up being something not to be worried about. And I think the other thing for me is being able to connect with other people that are working in the accessibility and the disability space that I may not have met had it not been for either our podcast or perhaps their show, where I've been invited to be a guest on their show. So that's been a real, like I said, a pleasure, a benefit is kind of expanding my network, I guess you could say, through podcasting.
Definitely. Awesome. One of my favorite pieces of podcasting as well, the networking and the expanding your network and meeting new people through the podcast. I think that's one of the reasons I will never give up podcasting. It is the best networking tool ever. And it's so much more fun than having a coffee date with someone. You actually get to learn a lot more in the 30-minute interview than you would over coffee, I think several times.
Yeah. And then you're sharing, and then that message is being shared out to any of your listeners as well. So it's interesting. It's been a journey, but I've liked it. Well, hey, I liked it enough to say let's do season 2. So
yeah, exactly. I love it. Now, are your seasons going to be based on time? Like, is it a year the season, or is it 6 months the season, or how are you pacing the seasons?
Well, we wrapped up season 1 at the right. Actually, December 3rd was International Day of Persons with Disabilities. So episode 14, which was the last one in season 1, was a solo show, but it was interesting because I happened to be in the Puerto Vallarta airport, and I was very impressed by the fact that they were celebrating International Day of Persons with Disabilities by giving travelers free massages, and all of the massage therapists were blind. And to me, that was really kind of accessibility around the world. And so we wrapped up season 2 with that episode. And so starting season 1 and the fact that we launched it in July, I think that we probably will run it same thing through to the end of the year, and take a little bit of a break in between seasons, in that first quarter. Yeah, in that first quarter, and then relaunch again.
I love seasons don't have to be any specific amount of time. They don't have to be any certain number of episodes. It's just kind of you feel like it's the right time for a new season. That makes a lot of sense. Well, Linda, this has been fun checking in with you about your podcast. Any last words of advice for our listeners out there today before we let you go?
Well, if you haven't started and you're thinking about it, then I can tell you it is worth the effort. So that's probably my one message. And I think for me, and I'm fairly busy, if I can, sit down. If I can sit down and spend half an hour just on Zoom talking to somebody and wrap that into a podcast episode, then I think anybody can spare time to make those things happen. And then really the other thing is utilizing it as part of your business model in terms of what it is that you're doing with the podcast. So those are probably the 3 main things that I would get across to people. So whether you're just started or you're starting or you're not sure what you're doing with your podcast, think around those kind of themes.
Yeah, those are great. Love that. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Linda, for joining us today. It's been so great chatting with you. And for those of you that are listening in and they're like, I think I'm ready for my podcast, you are in luck because Podcast Summer School is starting next week. So head over to amplifyu.com/podcast-summer-school-2023. And we'll be happy to help you get started with your podcast. Linda, I'm excited for you for season 2. I hope you have a fabulous time interviewing all sorts of amazing people and sharing your message with the world. And I look forward to having you back on Amplify You again soon.
All right. Thanks so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. Take care, everyone. Go out there and have a fabulous day. Amplify You family. We'll see you again next week.